Without wasting much time, I have the DG is here in the studio. Dr. Muda Yusuf is joining us again on the eve to the new year. Thank you very much, DG, for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's really nice to have you on the show.
It's a great honor. I appreciate it.
DG, I want us to start this way. 2019, we're a few hours, we're moving to 2020. In all of it, what are some of the positives we've seen? Because many have come out to say we moved up places in the ease of doing business. GDP rate seems to be getting better, not too well. But what are the positives you've identified looking at this, your research?
Yes, first, it is important to take a holistic look at the outlook. First, to have a proper insight into the direction in which the economy is likely to go. And secondly, for investors in the economy to also be able to develop the right kind of business strategy for them to survive in 2020. Because no matter what the economic condition is, businesses must go on.
Yes.
And even as bad as things are, quite a number of investors are still making money. So while we deal with advocacy issues, we also need to deal with strategy issues at the business level. So now, talking generally about the positives. Of course, one key positive is the fact that we had our GDP growth rate in positive territory. Compared to what we had last year to 1.9, Q3 this year is 2.28. When we compare this to the fact that about 3 years ago we were in recession and all of that, so this gives some level of comfort. Even though there has been some analysis comparing this to the population growth rate and implication for poverty, but it's still an improvement over what we had previously. Then, of course, some key macroeconomic indicators have also been stable. You take the exchange rate, for instance. We have had a reasonable level of stability in the exchange rate, contrary to the fears that were expressed at the beginning of the year about sustainability of these rates. And that has impacted positively on many businesses. I mean, predictability was easy. The risk of doing business was also much lower because the forex environment was not that volatile.
It used to be.
Yes. Then the reserves was also quite robust. Although until recently it was okay, but recently there was some pressure on the reserves. But at $39 billion US as at the last count, I think it's still fairly okay. It can still give some comfort in terms of the coverage of the number of months of imports that can do. Although there are concerns generally about the content and the structure of the reserves, because there's quite a lot of the portfolio content in the reserves. I know portfolio flows are generally hot money. They are not very reliable. And we need to be very careful the extent to which we depend on the portfolio inflows to support the reserves.
Take profits,
yes, and run away. And if there is any shock, it will just exit. And such a sudden exit, if the percentage component of that in the reserves is high, can cause very serious dislocations in the economy. The inflationary situation was not too good at the close of the year. It intensified to 11.28, and it's likely to remain so. First, for a number of reasons. We had the issue of the cost of doing business, issues of energy, transportation. Of course, there is this new element which is the border closure, in it. And
big one.
Yes, it's also a factor. Then, of course, we had issues on the supply side. Inflation is also about the output side of the economy. Yes. We had issues of flooding with the food. We had issues of security and all of that affecting the agricultural sector. So at the inflationary level, I think we had some challenges. Then in terms of the monetary space, the CBN had done quite a lot in terms of making credit available, to different sectors, particularly the real sector of the economy. Of course, there are debates as to whether that is the right approach or not. But at least we have testimonies of some manufacturers that have benefited from these intervention funds, long-tenured funds, single digits, which gives a lot of room, many investors to also do well. And also in the infrastructural sector, there have been some level of injection of funds coming from the CBN to support the sector. Then, of course, we had some policy measures which were also to drive credit. We had the loan to deposit ratio, which was put in place. And I've had quite a number of investors tell us that the credit has come down, that in fact, banks are now running after them to offer them money.
That's what some are saying, but I like to stay on that a little, that many are also worried that if the central bank continues to push the commercial banks, talking about LDR, the deposit ratio, looking at 70% as we move on, some are saying the security of these funds is something that we should also worry about. Do you
Yes,
think
I've heard that argument about the implication for the quality of loan assets. But the thing is that even as we speak, averagely, the loan to deposit ratio is around 60-65.
Okay.
Even before the introduction of this policy. Okay. So moving it to 70 is not as if it's such a dramatic change. And the important thing about that is also that it helps to promote financial intermediation. Because you had a financial system that was degenerating into a situation where what they do only is just to buy treasury bills, render some services, get fees, get charges, and they make more money from that rather than lending. And the whole essence of a banking system in any economy, more so in a developing economy, is to ensure the mobilization of funds from the surplus end of the economy to the deficit end of the economy. That is what financial intermediation is. But we have not been having that. Most of the deficit sectors of the economy are not getting the finance. Of course, sometimes you can't blame them because they talk about the issue of risk and all of that. But we need to do something about it, which is why I think the CBN has taken those steps to do so. Then, of course, you had some executive orders.
Yes, that's true. That's true. How well did that even help us promote local patronage?
Well, in terms of at the policy level, it is good, but at the implementation level, there is no impact yet. And that is where we will implore the government to see to it that it is one thing to make good pronouncements. It's another thing for those pronouncements to translate into impact. Yes. So I think in 2020, if you really want to support the economy, if you really want to build an inclusive economy, which is very critical, local patronage is very key. Because the power of procurement is one of the most effective instruments that you can use to support local industries. You know, because procurement at the federal level is something fairly substantial. And if you focus it strictly on what is produced locally, whether by large enterprises, and more importantly by the SMEs, the impact will be very profound.
DG, let's look at key variables as we move on to 2020 here. We've identified some. You talked about exchange rate. Despite the fact that there's still this comment of we having different windows. A particular amount for importation of petroleum products, particular amount for this, particular amount for that. This is what I think is still on the positive side for us, one way or the other. Now, in all of this, moving to 2020, what do you expect? How do we stabilize this, getting all of this right for growth outlook for 2020?
Well, growth outlook for 2020, because when we do projections in economics, we assume there are always some underlying assumptions. If oil price remains as it is, if oil output remains as it is, we are likely to continue to record positive GDP growth around 2%, 2.5%, which is not too far away from what was projected in the budget presentation for 2020. So it is an issue of the context, contextual issues. So if this assumption stand, then we are likely to see growth because oil price and oil output remains a very critical component of growth in terms of driving growth in this economy, because of the impact of the oil sector on revenue, and more importantly, the impact of the oil sector on foreign exchange earnings. So even though we have been talking about diversification, the structure of the GDP and all of that, but when it comes to revenue, because in all of these things, revenue is key. Foreign exchange earnings is very key, because without those two things, no matter what you do about wanting to diversify the economy, you need money to power the economy. So that sector is still very critical too. Then in terms of the exchange rate, again, is a conditional thing. If these key issues, if the flows from the oil sector remains okay, at least The latest figure we have now with oil prices is moving over $65 per barrel, which is good news. But the issue is that it makes the economy also very vulnerable. If we sit down and we keep looking at oil price all the time, it's not good for the economy. So we need to have an economy that is robust, that is stable, that is well diversified. And if we have that, the economy becomes less vulnerable to all these external shocks. So exchange rates will continue to be what it is, because for as long as we have the disposition of the CBN dealing with the economy the way it is currently handling the exchange rate, intervention, and all of that, and I don't see that changing under this regime. So if we are looking at the economy, we have to factor all of this in. So it's likely to remain stable if these key assumptions remain valid.
DG, let's quickly touch on agriculture, because time is not always our friend when we're on television. Now, in the report, 2.28%, the sector grew as in the third quarter, up from 1.79%. Something is happening in the agricultural space, but Nigerians are yet to really feel this impact. Everybody wants food on their table. When are we going to start buying gari, rice, and all of these things cheap the way they used to be, or maybe even better than it is at the moment?
Well, I think even now, when you talk of gari, let's take rice out of it.
Let's take rice out of it.
Yes. Gari, akpu, and all these things that are cassava based.
We have that graph on the screen there.
All those ones, I think in terms of local production, we are not doing badly. In terms of derivatives of cassava, if you take gari, for instance, if you take akpu, for instance, and some of those things. And even grains, because in the up north, there's a lot of consumption of grain-based food. They call tuwo, it's very popular. And down south, in many villages, the breakfast is all this pap and all of these things, So it is by the grace of all these locally produced goods, that is why many poor people are able to survive. Because their costs have gone up, but it's still relatively within some levels that are manageable. But the most critical thing in agriculture, particularly at the primary production level, is the issue of productivity. We haven't made significant impact in improving productivity. There's still very little mechanization. Majority of the players are still smallholder farmers. Majority of them are also aging. There's a lot of rural-urban migration, and there's very little support. The CBN has been throwing money at quite a number of things. But the fundamental infrastructure to support agricultural productivity are still not there. So that is why the sector is still struggling. The other levels of the value chain in agriculture, they are doing not too badly. We talk of marketing, talk of processing and all of that. Quite some investments are going there, and the margins at those levels are not bad. But at the primary production level, the margins are very thin, and productivity is very low, and it's also very seasonal in nature. So we still have quite a lot to do in agriculture if we actually want to position the sector to play the kind of role that it should play. And it's not just a federal issue. The state government have very critical role to play. The local governments have critical role to play. After all now, the local governments are getting their funds directly. So we should also hold them to account.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. I'm supposed to get feeds from the exchange, the close of the exchange. I don't know if that is ready, so that we could just touch briefly on that. Okay, DG, before let's look at the stock market. The performance has not been so impressive for the year ending 2019. What do you think? What do you make of this 15% losses?
Well, it's a combination of factors. First, the returns in the money market for most parts of the year was so attractive that it took the shine away from the stock market. Until recently, quite a lot of funds were going to treasury bills, a lot were going into bonds, and all of that was taking money away from the stock market. But now that it's beginning to reverse, we are beginning to see some positive trends in the stock market. Then again, it's also a function of the productivity of companies that are listed. If the environment is tough for them,
There's no way.
We are talking about regulatory environment. We are talking about policy environment. We are talking about all manner of shocks, policy inconsistency and things like that, that hit some of these sectors. Because no matter what we say, it is these big companies that actually give government the revenue. And whatever policy actions we take, consulting them is not a bad idea. So that you don't hurt the goose that lays the golden egg.
Even for new ones to come in, actions like that
yes,
will affect them.
They affect them. So the way we handle the big companies, the way we engage them is also very important. Whether at the fiscal policy level or at the monetary policy level. We should extend some courtesy to them as investors, because we are not showing enough courtesy to investors in this environment. And because we don't fully appreciate the value that investors bring to the table in terms of employment and all of that.
Let's see this clip for 1 minute, then we have you round up. Yeah, stock trading for the year. Well, parting shot, what do you make of this? It's closing positive, 0.87%.
Well, it is good, and I think it is also an indication that there are still a lot of prospects in this economy. We should be positive about it. We should get our strategies right. We should understand the structure of the economy, understand the strategies, and also understand the risk and the opportunities. But the reality is that this economy presents a lot of opportunities for investors.
Director General Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a happy new year in advance. That's our show. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next year. That's in a few hours. Enjoy the rest of your day.